This exercise does require a central file and several users to interact with, and it's going to be impossible for me to supply you with a file. The only thing I can do is show you this process in action. I've been given the task of modifying parts of the HVAC layout. So I zoom into the area where I want to work and select one of the ducts. If I try and move it, I'll get a message, and this error message cannot be ignored. It says that I cannot edit the element until Alice resaves the element to Central and relinquishes it, and I reload to latest. So what do I want to do here? I want to place a request with Alice. I get a further message saying that I've placed an editing request, and it's been placed to the user, Alice. I can continue working instead of waiting a response. So I can continue working by clicking on Close and press Cancel. In the meantime, a dialog box will pop up on Alice's computer saying that I've asked for control of these elements. I have to wait for her to grant my request, and I get a message saying that Alice has granted my request, and I now have been granted permission to edit the elements, which have now been highlighted on the screen. So I should now be able to select them, click on Move, and move the duct. In the meantime, a colleague, Bob, is working on level 2, and he wants to make some changes to the ductwork as well, only he seems to be working in the same riser location. He places a request with myself, and I get an editing request from Bob. We get a note here saying that synchronization is required to grant the request. I can click on Show, and it tells me there are no open views that show the highlighted elements. Searching through the closed views to find a good view could take a long time. Do I want to continue? Well, I'll say yes. We found the duct that Bob wants to change, but I cannot grant permission. What I have to do is synchronize with Central, and I'm going to relinquish control of borrowed elements. Before I do that, however, let's just check on the status of the work sets. Here we can see that Alice is an owner of the mechanical work set, Bob is a borrower of electrical, and I'm a borrower of mechanical. Let's do that synchronized with Central. Make sure that I'm relinquishing control of the borrowed elements and click on OK. Bob will now receive the message saying that his request has been granted. He is now the owner of the element, but he must also synchronize with Central as his file is out of date. Apart from the workset dialog box, which shows you who the owners and borrowers are in your project file, there's another way to see who has ownership of objects or what workset objects are placed on. For each view, you are able to see Worksharing display. So let's look at checkout status. The elements highlighted are checked out. Let's look at owners. We have a similar view, but how do we know who those owners are? Let's look at the settings. Here you can see we have user A, Alice, Bob, and Simon W. We can also see the individual work sets. This may be more help to us if we were to look at a 3D view and turn the Worksharing display settings on. Here we can see the different work sets, and here we can see the owners. And if we hover over an element, we can see who it was created by, its current owner, and who last updated it in the central file, as well as any editing requests. The important thing about workset ownership and borrowing is that when you do synchronize with Central, for the end of your session, you relinquish control of all the elements you either own or have borrowed. Now that I've relinquished control of those elements, you can see they have no overriding color. If I go back to the workset dialog box, you'll see that I'm now no longer an owner or a borrower. This workflow is extremely important when you're using Worksharing